Jack Nova had never intended to become a diplomat. In fact, his college career counselor had specifically written "avoid any profession requiring tact" in bold red letters across his aptitude test results. Yet here he was, straightening his regulation navy blue tie in the gleaming chrome elevator of Earth's galactic embassy, about to represent humanity to a dozen alien species who could vaporize our planet on a bad day. "First day jitters?" asked Trix Mendoza, his orientation guide, a woman whose perfect posture and immaculate uniform made Jack feel like a rumpled napkin by comparison. "Nah," Jack said, running his hand through his perpetually messy brown hair, "just wondering how humanity decided I was the guy for this job. I once told my ex her new haircut made her look like a dandelion that survived a windstorm." Trix's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "The Interspecies Diplomatic Corps has a unique approach to recruitment. Your psychological profile indicated an exceptional ability to think outside conventional parameters. Is that corporate speak for this guy's weird enough to talk to aliens? We prefer adaptively divergent, and your linguistic aptitude scores were off the charts." The elevator doors whooshed open to reveal a cavernous atrium teeming with lifeforms that defied easy categorization. Jack stepped forward and immediately collided with what appeared to be a floating jellyfish trailing bioluminescent tendrils. "Sorry. Glorp Zonda?" Jack stammered, trying to recall his xenobiology training. The jellyfish pulsed a series of blue and green lights and drifted away. "That was Ambassador Pulchrey of the Metazoid Collective," Trix whispered. "And you just told him his gravitational stabilizer makes him look fat." Jack blanched. "I did? No," Trix smirked. "But color pattern communication is complex. Best to stick with standard galactic until you've completed your language modules." As they traversed the atrium, Jack's eyes darted from one alien form to another. There were beings with exoskeletons that gleamed like polished chrome, others that seemed to be composed entirely of swirling mist contained within humanoid force fields, and one particularly imposing entity that appeared to be a sentient crystal formation. "So what exactly is my job here?" Jack asked, dodging a procession of knee-high furry creatures moving in perfect synchronization. "You're Earth's junior cultural lesson officer," Trix explained, nodding professionally to a being that resembled a walking cactus. "Your job is to facilitate communication between humans and non-human species, interpret cultural nuances, and prevent diplomatic incidents." "Prevent diplomatic incidents," Jack repeated slowly. "Me, the guy who got banned from 3 dating apps for inappropriate humor. Your unfiltered honesty is actually an asset in some intergalactic circles. Many species value directness over politeness. The Draconis, for example, consider small talk to be a form of psychological warfare." They arrived at a door labeled Human Resources and Xenocultural Integration. Trix placed her palm on the scanner. "One last thing," she said as the door slid open. "Whatever you do, don't compliment any aliens on their appearance, unless you've thoroughly studied their cultural norms regarding physical attributes. Some species consider appearance-based comments deeply offensive, others take them as proposals of mating, and a few interpret them as threats." "No problem," Jack nodded. "I'll just be my natural charming self, minus any mention of how anyone looks." Trix gave him a look that could only be described as prophetically concerned. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." Jack's first week at the Galactic Embassy passed in a blur of orientation sessions, protocol memorization, and trying not to stare at the ambassador from Rigel 7 who communicated exclusively through interpretive dance. By Friday he had managed to learn the names of most of his human colleagues, master the automated coffee dispenser that occasionally dispensed blue liquid instead of coffee, and only accidentally insulted 3 alien dignitaries. Progress by his standards. "Today's your big day," announced Commander Picard, Jack's human supervisor. No relation to the fictional starship captain, as he reminded everyone constantly, though his hairless head and stern demeanor didn't help matters. "Big day?" Jack asked, trying to remember if he'd forgotten some important orientation milestone. "The Vexorian delegation arrives this afternoon, first contact with their species in over a decade. They're notoriously private, but they're considering joining the Galactic Alliance." Commander Picard handed Jack a data tablet. "You'll be assisting with the welcome ceremony." Jack scrolled through the briefing, his eyes widening. "Wait, these are the insectoid beings from the Andromeda Galaxy, the ones who fought a 3-century war with the Prolaxians over a mistranslated menu item." "The very same," Commander Picard confirmed. "Their cultural sensitivities are complex. but your linguistic adaptability makes you uniquely qualified to assist. Is uniquely qualified code for expendable if things go wrong? Commander Picard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just follow protocol, stick to the approved greeting phrases, and you'll be fine. 3 hours later, Jack stood at attention in the embassy's grand reception hall, sweating profusely in his formal diplomatic uniform. The room was filled with representatives from 24 alien civilizations, all gathered to witness the historic arrival of the Vexorian delegation. A tall, willowy being with silver skin and eyes like liquid mercury sidled up next to Jack. "First time meeting the Vexorians?" asked diplomat Ilara from the Pleiadian Confederation, her voice musical and slightly amused. "That obvious, huh? You're vibrating like a quantum particle," Ilara observed. "Relax, the Vexorians appreciate calm energy signatures." "Right, calm," Jack muttered, trying to control his breathing. "Any last-minute tips? Their exoskeletons are a point of pride, very sensitive about them. And whatever you do, don't." The massive doors at the end of the hall swung open, cutting off Ilara's advice. A hush fell over the crowd as 3 tall figures entered, their movements precise and graceful despite their seemingly rigid bodies. The Vexorians were unlike anything Jack had imagined. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, they resembled humanoid mantises, with iridescent exoskeletons that shifted colors in the light. Their compound eyes glittered with an intelligence that seemed both alien and deeply familiar. The lead Vexorian's carapace was adorned with intricate patterns that Jack assumed denoted rank or status. "Ambassador Zella of the Vexorian Collective," announced the embassy's AI in a dozen languages simultaneously. With attaches Crix and Thal, the delegation moved forward, their multi-jointed limbs making their gait appear almost like a dance. Jack found himself mesmerized by the way Ambassador Zella's exoskeleton shimmered with blues and greens as she approached. Commander Picard stepped forward, performed the traditional Vexorian greeting, a complex series of hand gestures that Jack had spent hours practicing, and welcomed the delegation formally. Ambassador Zella's mandibles clicked softly as she responded in flawless Standard Galactic. "The Collective extends appreciation for Earth's hospitality." Jack stood transfixed as the formal introductions continued. Ambassador Zella was in an entirely alien way, absolutely magnificent. Her exoskeleton caught the light like a living opal, and there was a quiet dignity to her movements that commanded respect. Then, suddenly, it was Jack's turn to be introduced. "Junior Cultural Liaison Officer Jack Nova," Commander Picard announced, giving Jack a subtle nudge forward. Jack stepped up, his mind racing through the approved greeting phrases he'd memorized. But as he stood before Ambassador Zella, all those carefully rehearsed words evaporated from his brain. Instead, operating on pure human social autopilot, Jack smiled warmly, and said the first thing that came to mind. "You look beautiful today, Ambassador." The reaction was immediate, and catastrophic. Ambassador Zella's exoskeleton flashed a brilliant crimson. Her attaches leapt backward, mandibles fully extended in what was unmistakably a defensive posture. A high-pitched chittering filled the air as all 3 Vexorians began communicating rapidly in their native language. Alarms blared throughout the embassy. Blast shields descended over the windows. Security drones swarmed into the reception hall. "Diplomatic incident detected," boomed the embassy AI. Initiating Protocol Omega-9. Jack stood frozen, his smile fading as he watched the room descend into chaos. Commander Picard's face had gone from healthy pink to alarming purple in record time. "What did I say?" Jack stammered, turning to Ilara who had backed away several steps. "You just told the ambassador you wanted to devour her," Ilara whispered, her mercury eyes wide with shock. In Vexorian culture, commenting on physical appearance is exclusively a prelude to consumption. Jack's jaw dropped. What? No, I just meant she looked nice." "Well," Ilara said, watching as the security team formed a protective ring around the Vexorian delegation, "I hope you're as good at apologies as you are at compliments." Jack could only watch helplessly as his promising diplomatic career imploded spectacularly before it had even properly begun. The diplomatic crisis room was a stark contrast to the ornate reception hall. No windows, no decorations, just a sleek oval table surrounded by uncomfortable chairs, clearly designed to discourage lengthy meetings. Jack sat alone, slouched in one of these ergonomic nightmares, waiting for the axe to fall. The door hissed open, and Commander Picard stormed in, followed by a towering alien Jack hadn't met before. The newcomer had to duck to enter the room, his thick gray skin looking like volcanic rock and his forearms crossed in what Jack assumed was the universal posture for someone's about to get fired. Junior Liaison Nova, Picard said, his voice clipped and controlled. Meet Commander Flex of the Galactic Alliance Security Council. He's here to help contain the situation you've created. Commander Flex's yellow eyes blinked vertically as he assessed Jack. This is the human who threatened to consume Ambassador Zella. I didn't. Jack began, but Picard cut him off with a raised hand. Let me explain what's happening, Nova, Picard said, pacing the room. The Vixorians are currently barricaded in their diplomatic quarters, demanding emergency evacuation. 3 centuries of careful diplomacy are unraveling because you couldn't follow simple instructions. In my defense, Jack said, raising a finger, nobody specifically told me not to compliment a Vixorian. Commander Flex made a sound like gravel in a blender that might have been a laugh. In Vixorian culture, physical appearance is not a matter of aesthetics but of survival. Their ancestors evolved in a world of predators where being noticed meant being eaten. Their language doesn't even have words for beautiful or attractive in the human sense, Picard added. The closest translation of what you said to Ambassador Zella is, your exoskeleton appears delicious and I am considering consuming you imminently. Jack's face fell. Oh, that does change the context a bit. A bit? Picard's voice rose an octave. The Vixorians are now questioning whether humans are secretly cannibalistic predators who invited them here under false pretenses. That's absurd, Jack protested. I mean, sure, I enjoy a good steak, but I draw the line at sentient beings. Commander Flex's rocky face remained impassive. The Vixorians are a literal species. They do not understand human concepts like metaphor or casual compliments. When a Vixorian speaks, they mean exactly what they say. So when I said she looked beautiful, you declared yourself a predator, Commander Flex confirmed. And worse, you did it with a smile, which in their culture is a display of readiness to attack. Jack groaned, and dropped his head into his hands. Perfect, just perfect. Day 1 on the job, and I've already threatened to eat an ambassador. The situation is recoverable, Commander Flex said, unfolding one of his forearms to tap at a data tablet. But it will require careful cultural navigation. Exactly, Picard said, his color returning to something closer to normal. Which is why we're bringing in senior cultural specialist Dr. Levinson, too. No, Commander Flex interrupted, his yellow eyes fixed on Jack. This human must rectify the situation personally. Jack's head snapped up. Me? But I'm the one who caused the problem. Precisely, Commander Flex rumbled. The Vixorians value accountability. If we send a different human, they will perceive it as evidence that you were indeed expressing predatory intent and have been removed from the situation. But I barely understand what I did wrong, which is why you have exactly 1 hour to become an expert in Vixorian customs communication and conflict resolution, Picard said, sliding a data crystal across the table. This contains all the cultural briefings you were supposed to have studied before meeting the delegation. Jack picked up the crystal, which glowed with a faint blue light. And if I fail? Then humanity loses its chance to bring the Vixorians into the Alliance, Picard said, grimly. And you'll be reassigned to the diplomatic outpost on Pluto. Pluto's not so bad, Jack said weakly. Not the planet, Commander Flex clarified. The waste management facility named after it. Jack inserted the data crystal into the table's reader port. Right, 1 hour to become a Vixorian culture expert. No pressure. As Commander Flex and Picard turned to leave, Jack called out, quick question. In human culture, we often use compliments as icebreakers or to establish friendly connections. How do Vixorians do that? Commander Flex paused at the door. They discuss mathematical theorems. Mathematical theorems, Jack repeated dully. Indeed, the Vixorians believe that mathematics is the only truly objective form of communication. Their standard greeting translates roughly to, "May your calculations be accurate." As the door closed behind them, Jack stared at the information beginning to scroll across the table's surface. Vixorian history, customs, taboos, and an entire section labeled, Communication Hazards, Priority Review. Well, he muttered to himself as he began scanning the data, at least I know what not to say next time. The problem was, he was quickly realizing that list included almost everything a human would naturally say in a social situation. 57 minutes of intensive Vixorian cultural studies later, Jack's brain felt like it had been put through a quantum blender. He now knew more about insectoid social hierarchies, exoskeleton color signaling, and multidimensional mathematics than he had ever wanted to know. "Time's up, Nova," announced Commander Picard, striding back into the crisis room. He was accompanied by a human woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun, wearing the distinctive midnight blue uniform of the diplomatic corps' upper echelons. "Director Chen," Picard said, "this is Junior Liaison Nova." Jack scrambled to his feet, nearly knocking over his chair. "Director, as in, director of the entire Earth Diplomatic Corps." The woman's steely gaze seemed to X-ray Jack's soul. "The Vexorians have escalated this to a Level 1 diplomatic incident. Their High Council is now involved. Do you understand what that means, Mr. Nova? That I should update my resume?" Jack offered weakly. "It means," Director Chen continued, ignoring his attempt at humor, "that they're questioning their participation in not just Earth relations, but the entire Galactic Alliance. 327 worlds, Mr. Nova, that's what's at stake." Jack swallowed hard. "I've been studying their culture. I think I understand where the miscommunication happened." "Miscommunication?" Director Chen's eyebrow arched dangerously. "You directly threatened to consume a foreign dignitary. In some galactic jurisdictions, that's an act of war." "To be fair," Jack said, "in human culture saying someone looks beautiful is one of the highest compliments we can give." Director Chen's expression didn't soften. "Ambassador Zella has agreed to one final meeting before they depart. You will attend this meeting. You will explain human communication customs, and you will convince them that humanity is not a race of predators with deceptive diplomatic practices." "I can do that." Jack nodded, with far more confidence than he felt. "You have 15 minutes to prepare your approach," Director Chen said, checking her wrist display. "The Vexorian shuttle is already warming up. If they leave, the diplomatic repercussions will echo across the galaxy for decades." After Director Chen and Commander Picard left, Jack paced the crisis room, his mind racing. The standard diplomatic playbook wasn't going to work here. The Vexorians' literal-mindedness meant that typical human groveling and apologies might just make things worse. He needed something uniquely human, something that showcased humanity's greatest strength, their ability to adapt, to connect across differences, to find common ground in the most unlikely places. Jack snapped his fingers as inspiration struck. What if instead of apologizing for the misunderstanding, he embraced it? Used it to demonstrate the very thing that made humans valuable to the Galactic Alliance, their cultural flexibility and capacity for genuine connection across species boundaries. When Commander Picard returned to escort him to the meeting, Jack was smiling. "That expression concerns me deeply," Picard muttered as they walked through the embassy's restricted corridors. "Trust me," Jack said. "I've got a plan." Those might be the 4 most terrifying words in human language. They arrived at Meeting Room Alpha, the embassy's most secure negotiation chamber. The doors parted to reveal Ambassador Zella and her 2 attaches standing rigidly on the far side of the room. Their exoskeletons had shifted to a muted greenish-gray that Jack now recognized as the Vexorian equivalent of extreme diplomatic caution. Behind them, visible through the room's panoramic window, a sleek Vexorian shuttle hovered on the landing pad, engines glowing with pre-departure energy signatures. Director Chen was already present, standing with the perfect posture that seemed requisite for her rank. "Ambassador Zella, thank you for this opportunity to address the unfortunate incident. Junior Liaison Nova has prepared a statement." All compound eyes turned to Jack. He stepped forward, heart hammering in his chest, acutely aware that he was about to either salvage interspecies relations or doom Earth to diplomatic isolation. "Ambassador Zella," Jack began, then deliberately stopped himself. "No, I should use the proper Vexorian formal address. Esteemed calculator of precise values, I stand before you acknowledging a critical error in my translational algorithms." Ambassador Zella's antennae twitched slightly, a sign of surprise, according to Jack's crash course in Vexorian body language. "When we met," Jack continued, "I expressed myself using a human cultural protocol that has no accurate Vexorian parallel. I told you that you looked beautiful." The word hung in the air like a live grenade. Behind him, Jack could practically feel Commander Picard's blood pressure spiking. In human culture, Jack pressed on, this phrase serves multiple complex social functions. It establishes positive connection, expresses admiration, and initiates friendly relations. At no point does it indicate predatory intent. Ambassador Zella's mandibles clicked rapidly as she conferred with her attaches in their native language. After a moment, she turned back to Jack. "Your explanation validates our concerns," she said, her translator rendering her clicks and chirps into crisp standard galactic. Humans disguise predatory impulses behind pleasant-sounding words. This makes your species more dangerous, not less. Jack felt his carefully constructed plan beginning to crumble. Behind Ambassador Zella, the shuttle's engines glowed brighter. "With respect, Ambassador," Jack said, desperation giving him courage, "you're missing the foundational concept. Humans don't see beauty as a prelude to consumption. We see it as a recognition of inherent value. Value and consumption are linked concepts." Ambassador Zella countered, "That which has value is consumed. This is universal logic." Jack sensed the diplomatic ground slipping away beneath his feet. The Vexorians were too literal, too rooted in their evolutionary past to understand the nuances of human communication. "Unless, Ambassador," Jack said, sudden inspiration striking, "may I ask you a direct question about Vexorian mathematical principles?" The unexpected pivot seemed to catch Ambassador Zella off guard. "You may inquire. In Vexorian mathematical theory, is there not a concept of transcendental algorithms, equations whose value can be appreciated, but never fully consumed or resolved?" A silence fell over the room. Ambassador Zella's compound eyes seemed to refocus on Jack with new intensity. "How do you know of transcendental algorithms?" she asked, her voice carrying a new tone that Jack couldn't quite identify. "Because," Jack said, stepping closer and lowering his voice conspiratorially, "that's exactly what I meant when I said you looked beautiful." The room fell into a silence so complete that Jack swore he could hear the molecular filters in the air circulation system. Director Chen and Commander Picard exchanged alarmed glances, clearly convinced that Jack had just made everything infinitely worse. Ambassador Zella remained motionless, her compound eyes fixed on Jack with an intensity that made him wonder if she was calculating the most efficient way to dismember him. "Transcendental algorithms," she finally said, her translator rendering her voice with a new, almost thoughtful cadence, "are the most sacred concepts in Vexorian mathematics. They represent the ultimate paradox, entities that can be defined yet never fully resolved." Jack nodded, encouraged. "Exactly, and when humans say someone is beautiful, we're recognizing a similar paradox. We see value that can be appreciated but never consumed, complexity that can be admired but never fully understood." The Vexorian attaches, Crix and Thal, began chittering rapidly to each other. Their exoskeletons shifted through subtle color variations too fast for Jack to interpret. "An intriguing analogy," Ambassador Zella said, her head tilting slightly. "Yet it conflicts with our understanding of predator psychology. Predators do not typically appreciate that which they cannot consume. But that's precisely what makes humans different." Jack pressed on, warming to his theme. "We're evolved predators who have transcended our biological imperatives. We've developed the capacity to value things precisely because they exist beyond our consumption." Behind him, Jack heard Director Chen inhale sharply, clearly terrified that he'd just reminded the Vexorians of humanity's predatory evolutionary heritage. But Jack had committed to his approach. "Consider art," he continued. "Humans create and preserve beauty specifically to ensure it endures beyond any individual's ability to possess it. We build museums to protect beautiful objects from being consumed by time or ownership." Ambassador Zella's antenna quivered, a sign Jack couldn't interpret with his limited knowledge of Vexorian expressions. "When I said you looked beautiful," Jack concluded, "I was expressing the highest form of recognition in human culture, acknowledgement of value that transcends utility. I was saying that you, Ambassador Zella, have qualities worthy of appreciation for their own sake, not for what they might provide me." For several excruciating seconds, no one spoke. The Vexorian shuttle's engines continued humming outside, ready for immediate departure. Then Ambassador Zella did something that caused both her attaches to take a startled step backward. She extended her upper limb toward Jack, the chitinous appendage rotating to expose the softer undersection, a gesture Jack recognized from his crash course as a sign of extreme vulnerability in Vexorian body language. "Your explanation contains mathematical elegance," she said. "But I require clarification on one point." Jack glanced nervously at Director Chen, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "Of course, Ambassador. If human appreciation of beauty is truly analogous to our understanding of transcendental algorithms, then your statement upon meeting me was not a threat, but rather," Ambassador Zella paused, seeming to search for the right concept, "a recognition of inherent non-consumable value." "Exactly," Jack exclaimed, relief flooding through him. It's one of the ways humans establish positive connections with each other. We identify and verbally acknowledge qualities we admire. Ambassador Zella turned to confer with her attaches, their hushed chittering, accompanied by rapid color changes in their exoskeletons. When she turned back, Jack thought he detected a new quality in her posture. Something less rigid, more contemplative. In the interest of interspecies understanding, she said, I will provide you with a parallel from Victorian culture. When we encounter an entity whose qualities we wish to acknowledge without consumption intent, we say, your patterns exceed predictive modeling. Jack blinked. That's actually quite poetic. It is merely factual, Ambassador Zella replied. Yet I begin to understand that humans find value in the space between fact and interpretation. Director Chen stepped forward, her diplomatic training apparently overcoming her shock at the turn the conversation had taken. Ambassador, does this mean the Victorian delegation will reconsider their departure? Ambassador Zella's exoskeleton shifted to a blue-green hue that reminded Jack of tropical waters. The situation requires further analysis. We had not previously encountered a species whose language separates admiration from consumption so thoroughly. If I may, Jack said, struck by a sudden inspiration, there's a human tradition that might help illustrate this concept more clearly. We call it a toast. Commander Picard made a strangled noise that Jack chose to interpret as encouragement. A toast? Ambassador Zella inquired. Yes, it's a ritual where we raise beverages, acknowledge positive qualities in others, and then consume our own drinks, never the person we're complimenting. It demonstrates the separation between appreciation and consumption. Ambassador Zella's compound eyes seemed to gleam with new interest. This ritual would provide valuable observational data. Director Chen, quickly catching on to Jack's improvisation, tapped her communication device. I'll have the embassy staff prepare appropriate refreshments immediately. Perhaps we could continue this cultural exchange over a more formal dinner. Ambassador Zella turned to her attaches, who after a brief consultation, nodded their agreement. We accept this proposal, the ambassador announced. The departure shuttle will be deactivated. She turned her multifaceted gaze directly to Jack. Junior Liaison Nova will explain more human customs regarding non-predatory appreciation. As the tension in the room dissipated, Commander Picard leaned close to Jack and whispered, I have no idea what just happened, but keep doing it. Jack smiled weakly, his heart rate finally beginning to normalize. Just doing my job, preventing diplomatic incidents through creative miscommunication. Your patterns exceed predictive modeling, Junior Liaison Nova, Ambassador Zella said, using the Victorian phrase she had just taught him. And Jack, feeling suddenly bold, replied, You too, Ambassador. You look absolutely beautiful when you're not planning to evacuate Earth's orbit. Director Chen's sharp intake of breath suggested he might have pushed his luck too far, but to everyone's astonishment, Ambassador Zella's exoskeleton rippled with a color pattern that the translator identified as the Victorian equivalent of appreciative understanding. Perhaps, she said, her mandibles clicking softly, humans are more complex than our initial calculations suggested. 3 weeks later, Jack found himself in the embassy's grand banquet hall, surrounded by the strangest dinner party in Earth's diplomatic history. The Victorian delegation had not only remained on Earth, but had invited an additional 12 representatives from their homeworld to participate in what they were calling the Human Paradox Study. Try the chocolate mousse, Ambassador, Jack suggested, gesturing to the elegant dessert that resembled a small spiral galaxy on a plate. It's a perfect example of what we've been discussing. Something humans create purely for aesthetic and sensory appreciation. Ambassador Zella delicately maneuvered a spoonful of the dessert with surprising dexterity given her exoskeletal appendages. Around them, other Victorians were similarly engaged with various Earth delicacies, their compound eyes gleaming with what Jack had learned to recognize as scientific fascination. Remarkable, Ambassador Zella said after tasting the mousse. The molecular structure is arranged for sensory impact rather than nutritional efficiency. This confirms your assertion that humans derive value from experiences that serve no survival function. Exactly, Jack beamed. We call it pleasure, or art, or sometimes just really good chocolate. Across the room, Director Chen was deep in conversation with the newly arrived Victorian chief calculator, a dignitary whose iridescent black exoskeleton marked him as one of the highest-ranking members of their society. From the director's barely concealed smile, the discussion appeared to be going well. Commander Picard sidled up to Jack, a glass of champagne in hand. I still can't believe your catastrophic blunder turned into the diplomatic breakthrough of the decade. Jack shrugged. Just got lucky that my particular brand of screwing up aligned with exactly what the Vixorians needed to see about humans. The Galactic Security Council is calling it Nova's theorem, Picard said, looking slightly pained at having to deliver this news. The principle that human diplomatic failures can sometimes succeed precisely because they're authentic rather than calculated. I'm honored, Jack said, trying not to look too smug. Though in fairness, most of my diplomatic failures are still just failures. True, Picard acknowledged, but the Vixorians have formally requested that you serve as Earth's primary liaison to their culture. Apparently, they find your transcendental illogic to be mathematically stimulating. Jack nearly choked on his champagne. They want me, the guy who almost caused an interstellar incident by saying someone looked nice. Director Chen has already approved the assignment, Picard said. God help us all. Before Jack could respond, Ambassador Zella approached them, her exoskeleton glowing with the soft blue hue that Jack had come to recognize as her formal diplomatic coloration. Junior Liaison Nova, she said, I wish to inform you that the Vixorian High Council has voted unanimously to join the Galactic Alliance. Jack broke into a grin. That's wonderful news, Ambassador. Was it our irresistible chocolate? It was your contradiction, Ambassador Zella replied. Humans simultaneously display predator characteristics yet value that which you cannot or choose not to consume. This paradox suggests evolutionary potential our mathematicians find beautiful in our understanding of the term. Jack's eyebrows shot up. Did you just use beautiful in the human sense? I am experimenting with cross-species conceptual frameworks, Ambassador Zella explained, her mandibles shifting in what Jack had recently learned was a gesture of mild embarrassment. Your linguistic flexibility deserves reciprocal effort. Commander Picard excused himself, muttering something about needing to document this historic moment, leaving Jack alone with the ambassador. I have a confession to make, Jack said, once Picard was out of earshot. That first day, when I said you looked beautiful, I really did mean it as a compliment. Your exoskeleton has the most amazing patterns I've ever seen. Ambassador Zella's antennae quivered slightly. And I have a confession as well. In Vixorian culture, telling someone they resemble consumable material is not always a threat. Between certain castes, it can be what humans might call flirtation. Jack blinked. Wait, so when I said you looked beautiful, I initially interpreted it as a threat because it was unexpected from an unknown alien species. Ambassador Zella clarified. Had you been Vixorian, the same statement might have indicated romantic interest. So I accidentally hit on you, and you thought I was threatening to eat you. Jack summarized, trying not to laugh. That's got to be the worst first contact pickup line in galactic history. Ambassador Zella's exoskeleton rippled with colors that her translator didn't bother to interpret. Perhaps, yet it has led to unprecedented diplomatic success. The Vixorian Human Cultural Exchange Program already has over 1,000 applicants from my world, all because of a misunderstood compliment, Jack marveled. Indeed, Ambassador Zella agreed. Your species' reliance on imprecise language and metaphor initially appeared to be a deficiency. We now recognize it as an evolutionary adaptation that allows humans to conceptualize beyond literal reality. As the evening progressed, Jack found himself at the center of a growing circle of Vixorians, all eager to experience more human conceptual frameworks. He taught them about metaphors, sarcasm, and the baffling human tradition of saying the opposite of what you mean to people you like. By the time the banquet concluded, 3 Vixorian mathematicians were attempting to develop an algorithm for human humor, and Ambassador Zella had successfully delivered her first sarcastic remark, an achievement that received a standing ovation from the human diplomats present. 6 months later, as Jack prepared for his first diplomatic mission to the Vixorian homeworld, a package arrived at his embassy quarters. Inside was a small crystal sculpture that shifted colors in response to ambient light, along with a note in perfect standard galactic, to Junior Liaison Nova, whose patterns continue to exceed predictive modeling. May your calculations be accurate, your metaphors be illuminating, and your appearance remain entirely non-consumable. Ambassador Zella, Commander Picard, who had come to deliver Jack's final mission briefing, peered over his shoulder at the gift. Is that a Vixorian courtship token? He asked, his expression hovering between horror and fascination. It's a token of diplomatic appreciation, Jack corrected, carefully placing the crystal on his desk where the light caught it perfectly. Though the ambassador did mention something about introducing me to her brood sister, who apparently finds human unpredictability mathematically stimulating. Picard pinched the bridge of his nose. Just promise me one thing, Nova. What's that, Commander? Whatever you do, don't tell any Vexorians they have a nice exoskeleton, unless you're prepared for the consequences. Jack grinned. No promises, Commander. After all, humanity's diplomatic strength seems to be our ability to say exactly the wrong thing in exactly the right way. As Picard left muttering about early retirement, Jack picked up the crystal again, watching the colors shift and dance. Somehow, his career-ending mistake had transformed into his greatest achievement, proof that even across the vast gulfs of evolutionary history and alien psychology, connection was possible through the unique human talent for beautiful misunderstandings. Perhaps that, Jack reflected, was humanity's true gift to the galaxy, not our technology or our art, or our science, but our stubborn insistence on finding common ground in the face of cosmic differences. That, and our ability to turn a botched compliment into an interstellar alliance. Humanity, fuck yeah indeed.